Hey, now it's Brace for Impact, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm going solo one that ass, but it's still the same. We're talking TNA wrestling, and what a week it was in the world of TNA. We have a lot to talk about. Honestly, probably too much, and I'm worried I'm not going to get to it all, or I'm worried I'm just going to run way too long. I try to keep this to an hour and 15 minutes, because it is 6 in the morning, and what was that Snoop Dogg line? Um, I can't remember what we ain't going home till 6 in the morning, something like that. I can't remember the line. It's too early. Well, it's still good coffee for Snoop Dogg. As you know, I like to quote Snoop Dogg on this show. My intro is from the Doggy Style album. What's my mother name? Um, but yeah, man, we got a ton to talk about this week. It's probably I would say this is probably the biggest week in TNA in a long, long time. And 90% of it is like positive. There's a couple of down notes, but not as down as one would think. But there's some people out there trying to take the piss out of TNA, and that makes sense. Like, it shouldn't make sense. Everybody should be like, you guys are idiots. But they're kind of caught up in this war between AEW and WWE, and they have jumped into it. Because look at how big this week was. Like, if they didn't go and jump into this, they probably would have not been anywhere near where they were at this week. So they're not only they caught up in it, they're a part of it, right? They're actively engaging in this kind of like weird war between AEW and WWE, and that war is over. That war been over. Um, the only thing that's holding that, like, the only reason why there's still a war between those two companies is because Tony Khan has so much money that he's able to sign whatever talent he wants, right? And that's the only reason that there's even still an active war, is that one guy is still willing to spend as much money as possible to keep that war going. But WWE has blown so far past them. It's unbelievable. So and now they're kind of using TNA as pawns in their war, and TNA is reaping the benefits of it. And honestly, if like your TNA, it's like, it's smart. it's like you kind of, it, them partnering with WWE, it might end up being the worst thing ever, but right now it looks like it's the best thing ever for them, because they had an amazing week. They really did. But I do want to start. So I want to just kick the show off right away, talking the TNA WWE alliance. And I got some notes here from one Mr. Dave Meltzer. Said the TNA WWE alliance certainly helped the visibility for TNA. There are various theories as to the reasoning behind it. In the perception game, it's clear people are trying to push the idea, with WWE's help, that TNA is now the number 2 promotion. It immediately started on Busted Open. It's almost like when that announcement went out, they sent a text to Dave LaGreca and Bully Ray to say this, to start that conversation back up. Start the conversation, because they want people talking about WWE or AEW and TNA being on the same level, to kind of knock AEW down several more rungs. The problem is AEW is already down a lot, but they want to kind of push them even further down. It's wild. It's nowhere close on pay-per-view or television numbers unless TNA gets on a stronger channel. It can't possibly be. In Canada, where arguably TNA is on a strong or stronger channel, it has thus far not come close to AEW numbers. And this week was no different. I think they had their best week as far as their demo rating, but it was still like in the 30s. So, and I think AEW is like in the 60s, so like 60,000 or something like that. So, but this show drew more than most recent AEW tapings, although well below what pay-per-views are doing. The idea for WWE of clouding the issue of number 2 and helping promote one under its control is good without buying it. Plus, it may help future potential antitrust cases, given the results of the MLW case, in working with a group and not owning them, but having great control over them. And so that is a very salient point. That is an important point. Another reason why this partnership works for WWE is because they just got sued by MLW for antitrust, and UFC just got sued by a group of fighters for their antitrust type practices. And what happened with UFC? Well, UFC, they bought Pride, they bought the World Fighting Alliance. That World Fighting Alliance didn't even get started. They had like only a couple of events. They bought World Extreme Cage Fighting. They bought the Strike Force, which was really the only. They weren't close, but Strike Force did have like a good run there for a while. They were on. They were on and owned by CBS, and they were on CBS. They had regular shows there. They had regular shows on Showtime, and UFC bought them out while they were on the come up, and they were putting on some big shows. They bought them, and that's when they got Ronda Rousey, and they essentially bought them for their women's division. They brought over Daniel Cormier and Nick Diaz. Like that was a huge deal back in the day. And so they're buying up all these smaller companies, and they kept knocking down fighter pay. The percentage wise, the gap was getting further away between what fighters are being paid and what the UFC was making. And so that's ultimately why the fighters banded together and sued them, and they won. It was hundreds of millions of dollars that they won. And then TKO, because they bought UFC, and TKO was not guilty of any of those practices. It was UFC prior. But because TKO now owns UFC, they had to ultimately pay out. Similar thing happened with MLW, much smaller scale. But that was one of the reasons why they sued WWE, is because they were monopolizing the business. And so one of the benefits for WWE working with TNA is that they shield themselves from a future lawsuit for antitrust. And so it behooves them to prop up this organization to A, shield them from the antitrust, and B, to knock AEW down a couple more pegs, and 3, it could be ultimately a talent pipeline for them. So they can cut off funding for AEW for all these different television deals, all kinds of different things, but they can also cut off AEW from the talent pipeline, right? So, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Others very close to the situation feel WWE owning TNA as a separate group is still likely the end game. So I gotta aggregators. You guys got to do a little bit of a better job of your headline. Actually, I think you guys know exactly what you're doing. At no point did Dave Meltzer say that WWE was going to buy TNA. At no point. He said, and I'm gonna read this again so that way people understand exactly what he's saying, right? Because I feel like he took a lot of heat in saying he's lying, and so dumb, right? Because nobody's actually listening or reading what the words that he's saying. Others close to the situation feel, F-E-E-L, feel, not know, not believe, not have evidence of, nothing like that. Feel WWE owning TNA as a separate group is still likely as the end game. This would not be anytime soon, however. As things are structured, it would be difficult to purchase another wrestling company until 2028. Now, Dave didn't do himself any favors when he's arguing with people on Twitter, and they said that, I think it was Io, and Io, you're in the chat. I see you, buddy. When Io cited this antitrust thing, he said, well, WWE, but nobody said anything specifically about wrestling in their tweets. So he cited, well, they just purchased PBR. PBR has nothing to do with pro wrestling or MMA. So PBR would not be relevant to the situation. Okay. As things are structured, it would be difficult to purchase another wrestling company until 2028. They may want to avoid that, since a big part of the Kung Lee UFC lawsuit was its purchasing of Strikeforce and Pride, and the last thing TKO wants is a repeat of that lawsuit regarding pro wrestling. But elevating TNA to number 2 while TNA is beholden to them is a strategically great proposition for WWE. WWE's previous working agreements with the European groups included contractual clauses where WWE would have the right to buy the promotions. But those clauses were never exercised. That is another key point here that he's making. Their previous working agreements with the European groups included contractual clauses. He did not say that there is a clause with TNA. And as of right now, no one's reporting that there's a clause with TNA. He is saying that there were previously which is why some people in WWE would think that that's ultimately the end game. But I think those people in WWE are not educated enough to understand antitrust lawsuits and contract law, or anything like that. Okay. But those clauses were never exercised. Again, WWE did not buy any of those promotions. They didn't buy Progress, ICW, WXW, anything like that. TNA did attempt to sell to Tony Khan in 2018, and had talks a year ago with Scott D'Amore about selling, but turned D'Amore offer price down. Okay, so let's get to the big, one of the big stories that was been out in the last couple of days. I think a lot of people don't remember this, but this was a story back in 2018. This was a story back in 2018. Okay, All In, right? Impact Wrestling played a part in All In. You know, they had Tessa Blanchard there, and Don Callis was doing commentary on the show, and I think Brian Cage was a part of that show, and so it was like they All In wanted to feature like for everybody from every promotion. Oddly enough, All In, right? Nobody knew exactly what was going on. Nobody really knew about Tony Khan that like in as far as the public wise, but if you take a look back at All In, they were absolutely doing what kind of Vince did in the 80s, was showcase a lot of talent that they ultimately wanted to sign and bring to their promotion, right? So they brought a lot of talent in, and under the guise of, hey, we're just trying to do this big indie show. Would you guys like to be a part of it? And this guy, Tony Khan, is funding it. Bring your stars over. Bring your New Japan stars. Bring Ring of Honor stars. Bring Impact stars. MLW stars. And bring all these stars over. Lucha Underground stars. Yeah, you guys can all come on over. It's safe over here. And ultimately, that's what led to the beginning of AEW. That was the catalyst for AEW. And the entire plan was Tony Khan. It's like, I'm going to showcase these talent and I'm going to sign them from all these different promotions. And those promotions are, be damned. They're going to be worse off for it. Ring of Honor is now dead. Impact Wrestling was struggling for a long time. New Japan currently struggling. I just find it funny that no one's really thinking about it like that. You could say that it was predatory, or you could say it was a good business move. Either way, it's pretty similar to what was happening in the 80s. Pretty funny how all that works out. But so, anyway, they played a part in All In, and there was a rumor going around that Tony Khan was avoiding Ed Nordholm and Scott D'Amore, and he couldn't avoid Don Callis because Don Callis was doing commentary, because he thought that TNA was trying to sell to them. But at no point was ever a pitch ever made, a proposition ever made. Did they ever really have a conversation? The rumor was he was avoiding them because he was thinking that they wanted to sell to him. And honestly, I don't know that it's true. I don't know that it's not true. And I'm not going to call bullshit on the whole story. It's been around a long time. So this is not a new story. I could see them wanting to cut their losses in 2018. They had just went through the issue with Jeff Jarrett. And you got to remember the context of the time. This was Labor Day weekend, 2018. They're on Pop TV. In 2 months, they're losing their TV deal. They know that already. They already know they're not getting renewed by Pop, right? And you got this billionaire coming along who's got contacts. He's, the son of the owner of an NFL team. This huge corporation, all this money backing, and they know that he wants to fund this thing. And look what he was capable of doing with Cody and the Bucks and Omega and all these cats. The biggest indie show that's ever existed, All In, over 10,000 strong in Chicago. And he was the money guy behind all of that. You're like, oh man, this guy's wanting to put money into wrestling. Maybe we should go into business with him. Maybe he'll buy this thing, or maybe he'll just become our partner. And instead of starting from scratch, he'll use our branding. It was smart of him not to do it, because the Impact Wrestling branding at the time was toxic. Nobody wanted that thing, right? You got to remember the context of 2018. I'm talking about the context of 2025. 2018, Impact Wrestling, it was dead. They were about to lose their third TV deal in a row, right? They went from Spike, Discovery, I can't remember, Destination America, and then Pop TV, and they're about to lose that TV deal, and they know it, right? So you got this billionaire kid, and nobody knew him, but he's got a lot of money. He's excited about pro wrestling. Of course, you want to have that conversation. But he was smart that he didn't. It was smart of him not to buy it at the time because it was just a toxic, dead brand that no television executive wanted anything to do with, right? And so he started from scratch, and that ultimately ended up being the best possible decision for him. So I wanted to clarify that story's just been around a long time, but no pitch was ever made. Nothing ever happened with that. But if you remember, like, think about it from the Anthem perspective, they're losing tons of money on this thing at the time. They're about to lose a TV deal. They don't own Access TV yet. It's about to go on a hunting channel that no one's ever heard of, right? So, it would be wise of them to want to sell this thing at that point. Okay. And cut their losses. Okay. A key aspect is believed to be trying to open the door for TNA by having WWE support to get some of the international television deals left behind by Netflix. Guys, where did you hear that first? Where did everybody hear that first? I'm curious. Just want to know. Oh, yeah. Right here on Brace for Impact. I've been saying it since last Thursday, since it happened. I went live on my podcast last Thursday, or not. Yeah, was it last Thursday? I can't remember. The day that the announcement came out, I immediately went live, right? And said that, and it was Joe's idea first, so give credit to Joe. But this could be them trying to help them get those international deals. It clicked in my head. That's exactly how they got Sportsnet 360. That's how that went down, right? And you got these international deals, and WWE doesn't want AEW to get those deals because now they have a stronger foothold in the international marketplace, the global marketplace. But if you could prop up TNA, then you can ultimately cut off funding to AEW. Okay. Those deals can make a significant difference to TNA's bottom line. There are believed to be other things that will become evident in time, with WWE helping open doors to TNA to become the number 2 promotion. The most lucrative WWE deal coming up in a few months is the Sony 6 deal in India. But TNA already has a multi-year deal with Eurosport, so that one may not be able to be in play. So I think I don't think he knew that, because he's been talking about the Sony, and it's not Sony 6, it's Sony 10. I don't think he knew about the Eurosport thing, and Gerard emailed him, and then I tweeted him, and he never responded to either one of us, I don't think. But so they're on Eurosport, but here's the thing about that Eurosport. It's not like a big time deal. I don't know anything about Indian television. Okay. But I had some folks from India tweet me saying that it's very the shows are really delayed. It's not a big deal. It's a very small channel. Eurosport is around in a lot of different international markets, but it's not really like a big thing. I don't know this for a fact, so just nobody can say, "Oh, Mike says that it's not a real." It is a real deal, but I just don't think that it's like set in stone that they have to stay on that channel. That's what I would think. I think they could. I think they can go to Sony 10. I think they could. We'll see if fucking Jinder Mahal shows up. You know what the strategy is. You know what they're trying to do. You know at that point. There's also history that everybody brings up. Every promotion WWE has worked with in the past in the long term ends up in bad or worse shape than it started. None of the WWE's European allies are anywhere near as strong as they were before becoming WWE allies, and the opening up of NXT UK is a counter to the threat of ITV having weekly wrestling on television. When the ITV threat imploded because many felt it was the wrong product mix, and the reality is that while local wrestling was having a degree of success, it was likely nowhere near successful enough to draw network television level ratings. But the past often predicts the future, but this is a totally different era. And if TNA gets someone hot, WWE will get them eventually. And generally, this will enable them to box out AEW, not completely, but generally from any talent developed just because of this access issue. It's a very sound business strategy for WWE. For TNA, it's a short-term gain from exposure. TNA really wasn't going to do much on its own. The salary cuts of late shows things were not a financial positive before this. Okay, so the salary cuts, He is really stuck on the salary cuts. I guys, I tried to get word to him that these salary cuts are not what he thinks they are. I tried my best. He just is stuck on them, and I don't know, and it just keeps coming up. But these salary cuts are not a big deal. In fact, these salary cuts are making the company stronger. And I know that like it's hard to think like how could this company be in a stronger position if they're cutting salaries, because you're only looking at it in black and white, right? Those people were making more money than they should have been making, right? Based off of what they brought to the company. Okay. That is a mean thing to say, but it's accurate. Okay. They were trimming the fat on this company, something that a couple of other companies should probably look into. Okay. But they don't have these big network TV deals to be able to just pay people that aren't bringing anything to the table. Right. So these were not talent cuts because they're broke. They're talent cuts because they just don't feel like those people are worth the money that they're being paid. Okay. But the guy's stuck on it. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to tell you. The guy is stuck on these talent cuts. But I tried to tell two different people to get word to him, right? That these aren't what he thinks they are, but he's not budging off of it. So what do you do? All right. So that's where we stand right now with the WWE TNA relationship. I wanted to start off is the only evidence that we have is that this is nothing but positive as of right now. But we have been cautiously optimistic, but as of right now, everything looks good, and I'll continue to monitor the situation. As you guys know, I would say a healthy skeptic, and typically can be somewhat pessimistic, but as of right now, it's been nothing but positive.